Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashyakrito Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Namah Pranavarthaye Shuddha Jnanaikamurtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The sequence so far is shown that the error that comes because of Maya and the Shakti of Maya, the Avrana Shakti, which covers the knowledge. And then we looked at this Avrana Shakti. How can we get rid of this? If we can get rid of the Avrana, we understand the truth. The truth is always there. It's just a matter of removing the covering. Jnana Nivritti is what we are looking for. How do we get rid of this Avarana? Then he came with a couple of verses. He says, Asti bhati priyam rupam namachet pancha amshakam. Everything here is just these five things. Asti bhati priyam is Brahman. Nama rupa is everything else. And this Asti bhati priyam rupam and Nama rupa, he explained further by saying that the entire Jagat that we know and the ones we don't know also is nothing but Kambayu, Jyoti, etc., all the five elements and elementals, all living things, non-living things, including devas, animals, trees, humans, all of them, they are nothing but, they are not different from Satchidananda Brahman. But we still see differences. We see varieties. We see what apparently looks like completely unrelated things. The magic of Maya. The one in the many. Maya apparently makes us see so much variety, although all of these are nothing but one Advitiya Satchidananda Brahman, which is I. This breaking of this method that everything exists, differences exist, so many things exist, and they exist because of one Vastu. So wherever you see anything in this Jagat, whether you see it, you don't see it, wherever anything is, there is only Brahman. Brahman is. That Brahman is I, Pamasi. And all those examples we saw, all the gold ornaments, varieties, so many different ways, so many different uses, so many different names, all are nothing but gold. this understanding that all these differences are there because of the existence of existence itself. Sat. Because that is what existence is. That is what Brahman is. The easiness. Even when these are not there, as in deep sleep, Brahma is, I am, doesn't change. This difference, apparent difference, because caused by this one, is what is called a method to understand this Jagat. Brahman is, everything is. There is nothing, Brahman still is. It doesn't change. This method is called Anvaya Vyatireka. Anvaya, concordance, agreement. And Vyatireka, differences. So, where there is Jagat, anything in the Jagat, one single or multiple, that is Anvaya. But that Brahman, which is, all of which is nothing but Brahman, is none of them. Everything here is I. I am none of them. Every ornament in that gold shop is gold, but gold is none of them. Anvaya Vyatireka. There is no mala without the string. Without the string, there are only beads. Sutre Manigana Iva. But the string is not the mala. When words are there, thoughts are there, I am Anvaya. Even when the words are not there, thoughts are not there, as in sleep, I am. That I is not words or thoughts. All words or thoughts are I, but I is none of them. Vyatireka. This method of Anvaya Vyatireka is also used in Nyaya. You've seen when you draw inferences. When there is smoke, there is fire. But there is fire does not mean there is smoke. They also use the same logic. Anvaya Vyatireka. What is always there. Brahman is always there. Not dependent on time. Not dependent on any object. Yetadeva jignasum tattva jignasunat ātmanaha anvaya vyatireka yat syat sarvatra sarvada. That which is always there. And on which everything is dependent. Is Jagat. So now you see these two. The entire Jagat is there, varieties are there. They are dependent on Atma, self, I, Brahman. But I has nothing to do with it. This method of analysis helps us to see the difference between Tvam and Tat, and deep see inside Insight is not a very good word. And see also why there is no difference. Tattvamasi. Understand Tvam separately, understand Tat separately, and see that there is no difference. So having brought this up to this point, how do I go about understanding this? Shravanam, Malanam, Nididhyasanam as a process you cannot avoid. There is no way one can understand this without Shravanam, without Mananam and Nididhyasanam. Shravanam is the Anga. Mananam and Nididhyasanam become Angi. They follow Shravanam. He said in two simple verses, Asti Bhati Priyam Rupam and Kham Vayu Mano Teja, etc. How do I understand this? In Shravanam, you hear all these words, that every object is nothing but its Karanam. Object here meaning not necessarily only physical object. Every thought is an object of consciousness. Exists because of consciousness. Every thought, every feeling is non-separate from consciousness. But consciousness is none of them. How do I assimilate this knowledge and therefore arrive at the nature of consciousness as being non-different from I? Atmavare Shrutavyaha. You want to know Atma? Do Shravanam. Atmavare Mantavyaha. Atmavare Nididhyasitavyaha. That is it. Tavya. It has to be done. But is Shravanam adequate? No. Shravanam tells us something which seems completely contradictory to whatever we think we know. There's so many notions that fill our head. Which are deeply entrenched notions. There are false ideas. There are doubts, samshaya, about whether this pramana is the right pramana. And of course, other people make it even more difficult. People who don't understand anything, any of this, who never looked at this, they make it more difficult by trying to come up with logic, which on the face of it sounds correct. And we also read elsewhere, we also make our own conclusions. And making our own conclusion often is a toughie. Because once you accept it as your conclusion, your inference, then anything that you hear, whether in Shravanam of the Shastra or any other means, the mind is always working towards finding out how to negate that and put our idea, which we've concluded, as the right one. Which is one of the biggest things Adi Shankara did. He went around talking to people who had drawn their own conclusions. Karma is the way to mokṣa. Jnana karma samuchchaya is required to gain mokṣa. You have to merge with Ishvara for mukti. All kinds of ideas. And deeply entrenched ideas. Many of which assume an individuality of the jiva. But these people who argued with Shankara were people who were not doing vitanda. They start with that. Anybody who has drawn a conclusion starts by trying to defend that conclusion only. But if you are open, if you want to do vada, I have an idea. I've reached to this conclusion because of this. But if we have a different argument, I'm willing to listen to it. So hopefully those people had that kind of attitude, and therefore many of them completely changed. If that had not happened in Shankara's time, we may all have been Buddhists, or worse still, we may be reading namaz. That we all have that entrenched ideas where the falsity we don't see. So after Shravanam, the Angi is Mananam. Examine each one of these in the light of what Shastra tells us. Therefore, you have to start with some Shraddha in the Shastra as the Pramana. For that, you do a lot of arguments and discussions, for which Shastra itself gives us the means, showing how you can gain nothing without a Pramana. And how the Pramana that normally used in the world are inadequate to understand this knowledge. And therefore, what should be the Pramana? Especially if you are a thinking person, you start with saying, all right, I have accepted that these Pramana are not adequate. But then how do you say Shastra is the Pramana then? Then you examine that, as I did. Why can't a book on psychology be the Pramana? Or till you understand how to accept a Pramana, how as something as a Pramana, what should be accepted as a Pramana, as the means of knowledge. And the distinction between an object and the subject I, distinction at the level of apparent distinction, you have not yet understood. And therefore, how the Pramana has to be different. And arrive at the only possible Pramana in the form of Shastra. That develops Shraddha. With that Shraddha, that Shastra says this, I will examine whatever I know, whatever conclusions I have drawn, and see where the differences are and why. I don't give up my conclusions. I only examine them. And the beauty is, in the last thousands and thousands and thousands of years, with so many people having studied this, many of them brilliant in their own rights, who come up with their own conclusions, and many of them have then realized where the error is. The same exercise I go through. Through process of mananam. Everybody has to go through this process. Even then, even after I've removed all samshaya, all notions that have been sitting in my head, I still find it difficult to truly absorb it. That viparita bhavana does not disappear immediately. It's like a habit forming over many lives, perhaps. And for that, the other angi, nididhyasana. Nididhyasana, as Bhagavan Krishna said in the 6th chapter, also has to be the same thing. You have to first have done Shravanam and Mananam. What you learn in Shravanam, what you hear in Shravanam, has to form the basis for Nididhyasana. I can do just concentration. Meditation I can do. But if I have to remove the viparita bhavana, the strong habit that I've formed, which prevent me from understanding the truth and absorbing it, I have to do the same process of deep thinking on the words that I've understood. This process called Nididhyasana eventually, when concentrating on words such as Sat or Chit or Ananda, Brahman, and then on to Aham Brahmosmi, is also a process. We start by practicing simple concentration. And then slowly elevate it to focusing concentration on Ishvara. On the Jagat, the nature of the Jagat. And eventually on Nididhyasana, the words of the Shastra that one has heard while doing Shravanam. This process of Mananam and Nididhyasanam become key to removing the avarana, removing all the false notions, and removing avarana means covered knowledge. False notions come from wrong projections. Atasmin tad buddhi. That which is not, I assume, is. Just Nididhyasana. One needs to practice. Raising oneself to the level of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Samadhi means concentration. In the next few verses, this text goes into some elaborate analysis of nididhyasana. Two types of nididhyasana. Within that, three types of nididhyasana, each of them. So variety of nididhyasana. How does it lead to nirvikalpa samadhi? We will go through all of these in some detail. He's given it. Starts by saying that this dhyanam, or what he calls samadhi, is the way to remove the avarana. And that can be done in two ways. Hridi or bahihi. And this he breaks down further. Hridi means internal. I do concentration, dhyanam, nididhyasana, without any external object to support. And I can also do it by using external support. And within this Hridi, it has to be focused on something. No concentration can be in the air. It has to be on something. Either I do internally or I use external. But what is it on? So he goes on into breaking that internal and external concentration into savikalpa samadhi and nirvikalpa samadhi. So you have Hridi, Bahihi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa. Then he breaks it down further. Savikalpa is what? Where some thoughts remain. Even though the thoughts are of the nature of Brahman, unattached, thoughts remain. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is where no thoughts remain any further. There is only Advitiya Brahman. I disappears. There is no difference between the meditator and the meditated. So he breaks it like that. All Savikalpa Samadhi eventually lead to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Having said all this, he further breaks it down by saying, Hridi Savikalpa Samadhi can either be Shabda Anuviddha Samadhi or Dṛśya Anuviddha Samadhi. Dṛśya Anuviddha Samadhi is concentration on an object of consciousness, a thought, a feeling, a desire. That is what he calls Dṛśya. Dṛśya here meaning object, object of perception, object of consciousness. Anuviddha means connected to, connected by. And Shabda Anuvidya Samadhi. I am Asangaha. But there the thought is still there. I am unattached. Both of these, when practiced as consciousness, object of consciousness, lead to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Can we break Nirvikalpa Samadhi also into Shabda Anuvidya and Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi? No. Nirvikalpa Samadhi itself means Advitiya Samadhi. There is no Shabda, there is no Dṛśya. Therefore, he breaks it down into the Savikalpa Samadhi, Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi, Shabda Anuvidya Samadhi, and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Then he does the same thing with the other. He started, remember, with Hridi and Bahihi. There he also starts Bahihi, Savikalpa Samadhi, Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi, Shabda Anuvidya Samadhi, and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Really, when you come to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, you can't even have Hridi and Bahihi. So he counts 6. Hridi, Savikalpa, Shabda, Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi, Hridi, Savikalpa, Shabda Anuvidya Samadhi, Hridi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi, same thing, Bahihi, Savikalpa, Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi, Bahihi, Savikalpa, Shabda Anuvidya Samadhi, and Bahihi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But really, we can only break it into 5. That's why I said, no, after this, it looks like somebody who's trying to do hair splitting. So he breaks into all of these 6, but eventually they will have to lead to a single Nirvikalpa Samadhi, during which the process of Nididhyasana, one comes to know by removing the avarana completely, the ignorance completely, the nature of the self, which is the same as the nature of Ishvara, which is the same as the nature of the Jagat, which is the same as the nature of the individual. So this kind of detailed analysis of Nididhyasana covers in the 7 or 8 verses. We will read those verses. From verse 22 onwards. upeksha nama rupe dve
उपेक्ष्य नाम रूपे द्वे
सच्चिदानंद तत्परः
सच्चिदानंद तत्परः
समाधिं सर्वदा कुर्यात्
समाधिं सर्वदा कुर्यात्
हृदये वाथवा बहिः
हृदयेवाथवा बहिः
सविकल्पो निर्विकल्पः
सविकल्पो निर्विकल्पः
समाधिर्द्विविधो हृदि
समाधिर्द्विविधो हृदि
दृश्य शब्दानुवेदेन
दृश्यशब्दानुवेदेन
सविकल्प पुनर्द्विधा
सविकल्पः पुनर्द्विधा
कामाद्याश्चित्तगाः दृश्याः
कामाद्याश्चित्तगादृश्याः
तत्साक्षित्वेन चेतनम्
तत्साक्षित्वेन चेतनम्
ध्याये दृश्यानुविद्धोऽयम्
ध्याये दृश्यानुविद्धोऽयम्
समाधिः सविकल्पकः
समाधिः सविकल्पः
असङ्गः सच्चिदानन्दः
असङ्गः सच्चिदानन्दः
प्रभो द्वैतवर्जितः
प्रभोद्वैतवर्जितः
अस्मीति शब्दविद्धोऽयम्
अस्मीति शब्दविद्धोऽयम्
समाधिः सविकल्पकः
समाधिः सविकल्पकः
स्वानुभूतिरसावेशात्
स्वानुभूतिरसावेशात्
दृश्यशब्दावुपेक्षयतु
दृश्यशब्दानुपेक्षितः
निर्विकल्पः समाधिः स्यात्
निर्विकल्पः समाधिः स्यात्
आवता स्थितदीपवत्
निवतस्थितदीपवत्
इवता स्थितदीपवत्
निवतापस्थितदीपवत्
So how do we do this? We've gone through this Anmaya Vyatireka, separated Nama Rupa, which forms the entire Jagat, and Satchidananda Tatparaha, that which is the very basis, adhara, for the entire Jagat, Satchidananda. Upeksha Nama Rupe Dve, Satchidananda Tatparaha. When you see the world and you're able to see that Nama Rupa of individual elements in the Jagat, which all look different from each other, including people, including I and you, all Nama Rupa. In fact, in the case of humans, we take it to another fine level. Each individual is given a separate name. Devadatta, Somadatta, whatever Datta. We take it to that fine level. But it is Nama Rupa. Without recognizing that Satchidananda which pervades everything, which pervades everybody. At the first level, we accept an Ishvara and say this entire Jagat, including each one of us, Devatiryang Naradishu, is only one Jagat Karanam Brahman, Ishvara. And then we look deeper into that and say that Jagat Karanam Brahma, whom we call Ishvara, is the same as the Advitiya Brahman. And we look at individual Jiva with its own individual names and forms, examine that in detail, and arrive at the conclusion that that is also non-separate from the same Ekameva Advitiya Brahman. Everything is only that. But that Brahman is none of these. That Brahman is not this body, mind, sense complex. That Brahman is not Deva. That Brahman is not the mountain. That Brahman is not the waterfall. But all of them are only Brahman. So when we start this process of concentration, he says, Upeksha nama rupe dve. Ignoring what looks on the surface like differences because of nama rupa. Take them out of the equation. Upeksha nama rupe dve. Disregarding these nama rupa. Satchidananda tatparaha. You look at what is the real Satchidananda. And like I said, you start with Ishvara, but even in Ishvara, you see only Satchidananda. In the individual, you see Satchidananda. In a snake, you see Satchidananda. Therefore, we pray to everything. With that focus, with that understanding, it says, Samadhim sarvada kuryat. Samadhim kuryat. May you get into the fact of concentration, of nididhyasana. Sarvada kuryat. Whenever, wherever you get a window, I don't have time at all. Make time. Slowly make time. Sarvada kuryat. And how do you do it? He says, I divide this into two parts. You can do Hridaye, in the seat of the knowledge. That single pointed concentration, Chitta Ekagrita. The locus of the Satchidananda. Satchidananda is everywhere. There's no where for Satchidananda. But for purpose of concentration, for purposes of meditation, we meditate internally. Hridi. Athava bahihi. So already the first division is done. Hridi samadhi, bahihi samadhi. But he says you do this all the time. Samadhim sarvadha kuryat. Do it hridaye or bahihi. Samadhim ahita buddhihi samadhihi. Samyak ahitam. Focused mind, concentrated mind. You can do dhyana only on what you know. So what you know can be within oneself or what we know as an external object. Either way, he says, focus your thinking, your mind, all the faculty of thinking. Here, we look at the entire thinking faculty. Because we split that and we've understood through this process of Anvaya Vyatireka There is only Brahman. Everything is Brahman, but Brahman is none of them. Focus on that through the process of samadhi, either Hriday or Bahihi. Then what? This twofold division of samadhi that he's come up with, he takes this samadhi in the seat of concentration, seat of knowledge, which he calls Hriday. Many places in the text, other texts also, you will find this in the seat of knowledge. Again, still in Savikalpa Samadhi. He says, in this Hriday or in Bahihi, you can further split it into Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa. Yesterday, I was going through a presentation on Tattva Bodha. Beautifully broken down into the elements for analysis purposes. This is something like what he is doing here. Taking nididhyasana into its various types and categories and breaking it down and saying Bahihi Samadhi, Hriday Samadhi, Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And then he'll keep breaking it further. Savikalpo Nirvikalpaha. Either Savikalpa or Nirvikalpa. Samadhi Dvivido Hriday. This, let's take the one which is internal, Hriday. That can be two types, Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Savikalpo Nirvikalpaha Samadhir Dvividho Hriday. That Savikalpa Samadhi within can further be broken down. Dṛśya-shabdānuvedhena Savikalpa Punardvidha. Savikalpa Samadhi means, as I said, ideas, thoughts are present. And Nirvikalpa Samadhi is where all thoughts merge into that one Advitiya Brahman. All ideas, thoughts, everything merges into that one Advitiya Brahman. So that's Savikalpa Samadhi, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. You may start all your process with Savikalpa Samadhi, but eventually all nididhyasana has to move, and it will move if one does it seriously, to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This can be practiced, he says, within Hriday. And where thoughts are present, then again it breaks down further into Dṛśya and Shabda Anuvidha Samadhi. Association with object of consciousness. He will explain what these are. Right now, he's just breaking it down into Dṛśya Anuvidha Samadhi and Shabda Anuvidha Samadhi. Either with an object which can be cognized, or with a sound. So, Dṛśya Shabdhanuvedhena Savikalpa punardvida. Dvida is two types, broken down into two types of Hridi Savikalpa Samadhi. In Savikalpa Samadhi, the knower-known difference continues. I am concentrating on, I am the knower, and I am concentrating on what is to be known. In Nirvikalpa Samadhi, that distinction disappears. Meditator is the meditated. This is the initial steps of Samadhi that he's talking about. Samadhi with this twofold division, Di and Bahihi, divided further into Savikalpa Samadhi and Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And that Savikalpa Samadhi is again broken into Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi and Shabda Anuvidya Samadhi. So Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi is the one that is focused on an object of consciousness, object of the mind here. That which is available in the mind. The object is available in mind. Maybe a thought, maybe anything else. Becomes the Dṛśya Anuvidya Samadhi. We'll talk more about it in the further verses. We will run through these now that we have the overall picture, run through these definitions fairly quickly in the next class. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Yo Namaha. Harihi Om.